Hello everybody, welcome back. My name is Keegan and this is my booktube channel. I kind of feel like calling this a booktube channel is a little bit of a stretch because this is literally only my second video. I know that in my last video I said that I probably wouldn't even post that video and then I probably would never even make another video for a booktube again. However, unfortunately for me, I actually do read. And therefore I keep reading books that make me want to rant about them, and that makes me want to make videos about them. So here we are, back for my second ever booktube video. Welcome. So the book that I need to rant about today is called Young Mungo. This book annihilated me. And by annihilated me, of course I mean that this book literally put duct tape over my mouth, hog-tied me, threw me in the trunk, drove me out to a cliff, and chucked me off the side into the ocean and watched me drown. Like, that is how absolutely destroyed I was by this book. You might be wondering, like, oh my gosh, Keegan, are you okay? Like, that sounds like quite the ordeal. Like, how did you get through that? Like, how are you feeling now about it? And you know what? I'm so glad you asked, because that's the whole point of this video, is to talk about this. So, I have my notebook with me, I have my book. Let's get into it. Oh, and before I actually start, I really do want to say that my last video was like 30-something minutes long, and I'm really gonna try to make this one way shorter, like 10 minutes max, hopefully, so we'll see. So I was thinking about how to communicate the basic premise of this book to you, and then I realized that the internet exists, and I probably should just let the internet do that for me. So it says that Young Mungo is a novel that follows Mungo Hamilton, a teenager navigating a life of poverty and parental neglect in the early 1990s Glasgow. Glasgow? Glasgow?
Sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.
So anyways, when Mungo falls in love with someone who I shall not name in order to avoid spoilers in this exact moment, it says that he must confront homophobia, toxic masculinity, and religious conflicts of the society of his time. But I guess what that blurb doesn't really say is that this book is split into two timelines. So there's the one timeline where we're sort of following Mungo as a teenager through this point he gets to where he goes on this fishing trip with these two guys, and once he embarks on this fishing trip with these two guys, that storyline is then taken off of the end and then split into pieces and put in the rest of the novel at different points. So you kind of get this sort of going back and forth between story one, story two, and they sort of build into each other in a way, and it's actually quite fascinating. So in order to make this video a little shorter, I figured what I could do is just talk about some of the things I liked, and then talk about some of the themes. So the first thing I liked about this book, honestly, was just Mungo as a character. I thought he was super fleshed out. I thought when you're reading this book, even though it's in the third person, you really do get a sense that you are in his worldview. You're kind of in his mind. In fact, you get so into his headspace that you can really feel what he's going through, and you get this sense of basically every single emotion that he has, and it really, at least for me, drew me in to want to empathize with this character a lot. I looked back at my Goodreads updates as I was reading the book, you know, over a couple weeks, and I kept putting things like, "Aw, Mungo," or "Poor Mungo, I just want to give him a big hug." Douglas Stuart really does write Mungo in a way that is so realistic and so easy to get behind that you really do feel bad for him, and you instantly start rooting for him pretty much from the beginning, and it only gets more and more intense as the novel goes on. So now I'm going to start wading into spoiler territory. Warning, warning, I'm about to go into spoiler territory, so if that's going to bother you, click away now. Another thing that I really liked about this book was the relationship between Mungo and James. Bro, just give me any kind of relationship between any two people across a political divide, across a religious divide. If there's any kind of divide where these two people are set at odds just by the fact of who they are, and they somehow reach across that divide, and they form a relationship and then slowly start to fall in love with each other until they can kind of unify those two different things, or if they can't unify them, if they can figure out how to love each other in spite of those things. Bro, it just feels like I'm levitating. I eat that stuff up, bro. It's like, put it in my cereal, put it in my lunch, put it in my dinner. I just want it over and over all day long. I just want to eat that stuff all day long, baby, all day long. Another reason that I like the relationship between Mungo and James is not just the political divide thing, but more so because they really have a lot of tender moments, and I think that Douglas Stuart is such a masterful writer, because there are so many moments where we see Mungo and James having these really sweet, tender, innocent moments together that really stand out as this sort of innocence and this purity that is highly contrasted with the rest of the novel, with the rest of the environment that they're in. In particular, when James starts to open up with Mungo about his mom and about the complex relationship with his dad, and they're lying in the bed together kind of innocently, like not even facing the same way, like their feet and their heads are touching, if that makes sense. James starts to open up to him and then loses it and starts crying, and Mungo has this really strong instinct, like almost beside himself, to flip over so that they're face to face, and then he pulls James into his chest and comforts him while he cries. So it's moments like that that happen in sort of these little sparks throughout the novel that make you really see how innocent, how pure these two people are, especially compared to their environment. Another example of this is when they literally have to go all the way out of the city and that's the first time they kiss. It really gives you that contrast of, oh wow, like they can't really exist in this way together in their normal context, but if they can go on this journey somewhere else to this beautiful, natural, peaceful place, there they can be together in a way that they want to, in a way that is pure and innocent for them. And you can even see this in the example towards the end of the novel where Hamish is beating on James. Even in that moment, the way that Douglas Stuart describes how Mungo is witnessing this act of violence really draws out the tenderness of the relationship that they have, because Mungo is so hurt and so in pain and so fiercely wanting to defend James that he actually stands up to his abusive, troublesome, toxic, masculine older brother in order to protect James. But it doesn't really, go the way that Mungo wants to, but you can still see that tenderness and that connection there. Another random little point about this novel that I really liked is that this novel tackles some really tough subjects like sexual assault, violence, all kinds of things. But I think that the way that Stuart handles these things, he does it with such care and such poignancy and such a soft hand that I really do feel that it's not something that is gratuitous or too much or anything like that. Like, I really feel like he's not doing it just for shock value. I think he's doing it because he really wants to explore these themes, and since he handles it so delicately, it really did come across well, and I thought that was a really beautiful aspect of how this novel was written. Another random thing I liked about this novel was basically poor wee Chicky, because he stands out as this sort of like gay mentor to Mungo. And at first he's sort of this like tangential character, this like weird person, this social outcast, so we're not really sure what's going on with him. Maybe he's a pedophile, maybe he's a creep, like why is he always kind of cooped up inside, things like that. But by the end of the novel, we really do get more of a picture of who he is, and he really is somebody who is trying to protect the vulnerable. And so when he has a chance to interact with Mungo towards the end of the novel, he takes that as an opportunity to encourage Mungo and to tell him the things that I think that Mungo really needed to hear as someone who's also gay and is like way, way, way older and has already sort of lived his whole gay life. And what's interesting about poor wee Chicky is that towards the end of the novel, when they're talking to each other, it kind of seemed to me that poor wee Chicky was this sort of foil for Mungo. And I mean that in the sense that poor wee Chicky was describing to Mungo that he had actually been in the same situation or a similar situation as Mungo when he was younger, and poor wee Chicky wishes that he had had the bravery, the tenacity, the gumption to just go out there and try it and to take a risk for love. And that's the exact crossroads where Mungo finds himself at, and he's not sure if he should or not, but poor wee Chicky basically just encourages him, like, you should just do it. Don't be like me. Don't end up like me, all single and alone. And not like, that was his only chance at love. I don't think that's what poor wee Chicky is saying. I just think that he's encouraging Mungo to take a shot, to give himself the life that he really deserves. I also love this little interaction between them because it really to me seemed like queer found family vibes, where like these two people are not really related, but queer people, find each other and they choose who their family members are. And I think that Mungo getting to have this sort of older gay mentor is really a gift that he can use to change the trajectory of his entire life. It's an opportunity for Mungo with his budding sexuality to make a choice to go down a road towards love and towards family and towards this sort of sacred unity with other humans, instead of going down the road that he was going on, which was violence and fear and hiding. And then you have to wonder at the end of the novel, because it's left so open-ended, like maybe because of this conversation with poor wee Chicky, that actually is what gave Mungo that extra little shove to come back and look at his life and be like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, this is not who I am. I can be somebody more than this. This abuse, this pouring out of my heart to get stomped on, this violence, this fear, this hiding. And so because of all those things, I'm of the opinion that Mungo does end up walking across the street and like getting towards James and moving on to a different life. I know there's all kinds of opinions on how the book ends and like what that means and blah, 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 blah. But I really do think that based on everything, the way the trajectory of the book was going, that that's really what Mungo decided to do. And I think it's less sort of ambiguous because we're hoping that's what he does. But, you know, life is complicated and maybe there's a chance that he wouldn't do that. And so I felt like that was also really masterful of Stuart to do because it kind of holds up a mirror to yourself to say, the way that he ended the book, it holds up a mirror to you to say, what would I do in this situation? Would I have the bravery to change my life? Would I be able to overcome the poverty, the violence, the fear, the shame that's been so inundated in my life and that has been so harmful and keeping me down and held back? Could I possibly break free of those things in my life? So I really do think that Stuart ended the book this way to say, so what would you do? You know, what would anybody do? And I thought that was really beautiful. So, sorry, I ran out of memory, and then I keep doing this stupid, horrible thing where I keep filming at sunset, and so the lighting is changing every single second that I'm filming, and it's really not helpful. But anyways, I was just saying that I think that the charge for Mungo really is this idea that he needs to start putting himself first. There's this quote from The Perks of Being a Wallflower that I really like, that goes along the lines of, you can't just put everyone's lives ahead of yours and think that counts as love. And I really think that's kind of what Mungo is doing in this book without realizing it. He's putting every single person's needs and wants and desires and hopes and dreams above his, and he's really not giving himself a chance to experience love. And I think that's why the end of the book is so poignant, because that's the moment where he's making the decision. And then we just kind of get left hanging and think, well, hopefully he does make that decision, you know? And to round up this discussion, I just wanted to talk about the themes of the book because they're really cool. So I've already kind of touched on the first one I thought of, which was this idea of conformity versus participation, right? So Mungo has this choice. He can either keep conforming and hiding and living in this sort of cycle where he keeps pouring himself out, but no one ever really pours anything back into him, or he can participate and he can make a choice for himself and do something different with his life. That decision mainly coming through the form of James. And then for the rest of the themes, I had to write them down because they're so interlocking. It was really hard not to like get confused in them. But basically, other themes that I noticed in this book that I've kind of already alluded to are violence, trauma, abuse, innocence versus corruption, masculinity, sexuality, love, and the things that we do for people that we love. And the way that these are all interconnected is really interesting. Because, like I said before, there's this innocence and this purity and this sacredness that Mungo has with James. And they have these really small moments that are these little bright sparks in an otherwise dreary landscape, full of darkness and violence and fear and corruption. So then we contrast that innocence of these two people with their environment, which is full of violence. There's the violence that Hamish does against people in his family. There's the violence that he does towards other boys in the community just because they're Catholic. But then there's also this kind of violence that happens within the family where Mungo's mom is an alcoholic and she gets these episodes in which she's not really acting like herself and she can become really controlling, really abusive, really harmful to Mungo and his siblings. So then we see this connection between the trauma and the abuse that Mungo has experienced filtering into corruption. So all these sort of innocent things about him where he is loving without end and he's pure and cute with James, these are all corrupted by his experiences in his environment of violence from his family and violence from other people. And of course, all of these things are intricately connected to ideas around masculinity. What does it mean to be a man? Can I have feelings for another man and still be a man? Is there something wrong with my sexuality if I love this person? And of course, there's the idea that this love, again, is this innocence and this purity. But then unfortunately, again, this love also can circle back to violence because, like, for Hamish, he's violently acting out and beating up James at the end of the novel because he feels like James is abusing Mungo. But truly, Mungo actually loves James and Hamish actually loves Mungo, and he's trying to beat on James to try to protect Mungo, but that's really not what he needs or what he wants to have happen, but he doesn't have the language to be able to say anything about his sexuality or about his masculinity or the innocence and the purity that Mungo has with James. So I could keep going on and on about that, but I really just wanted to communicate that on some level to say that I think that Douglas Stuart is so masterful. Like, this interweaving of all these themes is honestly like immaculate. Like, it's so good. And then the last thing I want to talk about really quickly is just the things we do for the people we love. There's all these crazy things that happen throughout the novel in which someone loves someone else and then they do something crazy for that person. So for example, Mungo punching Jody over and over again in the stomach because they are hoping that it will terminate her pregnancy. Or at the end, like I was saying, like Hamish beating up James because he's trying to do that for Mungo. Or even better, Hamish pretending like he's Mungo when the authorities come in order to protect Mungo. There's also the moment when Jody goes and finds James at the end and really convinces him, like, you need to go find Mungo. And then of course there's James at the end himself, after being completely brutalized by Hamish, still goes and tries to find Mungo before he leaves town. And so there's this really beautiful and really heartbreaking and really evocative theme about people will do crazy things to the people that they love, and sometimes it's not always the best thing or the thing that's even really needed. But I think that this novel really beautifully touches on how people will go to lengths to protect, to serve, to seek out, to find the ones that they love. And so anyways, this is all to say that I found this novel really outstanding. I found it super heartbreaking. I found it so spellbinding. I found it so captivating. I was entranced. I was taken into Mungo's point of view. I was exploring all these different themes about masculinity, sexuality, violence, addiction, trauma, innocence, corruption, conformity, participation. It really just felt like this masterpiece, like this tapestry of all these things woven together in this really beautiful, tragic novel, that the end of which gets you really to think about, what would you do in this situation? Would you take all of this whole tapestry of things and would you move forward? Would you have the courage? Would you have the bravery to change your life? And oh my gosh, it was so good! Oh, it was so good! So I highly recommend that you read it. I really don't believe that you'll regret it if you do. But again, there's a bunch of trigger warnings, so maybe look into those if that is something that is a concern for you. Okay, I'm afraid that this video is about half an hour now. I really have been ranting for a long time. I just can't help myself. I just get into wanting to talk about all these different themes and things, and they're just so good. And I find so much value in communicating them and getting them out of my body and sharing them with other people and processing them and really thinking through them, because it really does help me think in my life, how do I want to interact with all these different topics? And can I be somebody like Mungo who has the bravery to make different decisions for his life? I don't know. So anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you haven't read Young Mungo, I really hope that you will, because as you can tell, I don't know why you would watch this video if you haven't read it. But either way, the themes in it are really good, and I really think it's something worth thinking about. But yeah, that's all I have for you for now, so bye! Bye-bye! Bye! Bye-bye-bye-bye-bye!